Now, the birth of Jesus the Messiah took place in this way. When his mother Mary had been engaged to Joseph, but before they lived together, she was found to be with child from the Holy Spirit. Her husband, Joseph, being a righteous man and unwilling to expose her to public disgrace, planned to dismiss her quietly. But just when he had resolved to do this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, "Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife, for the child conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you are to name him Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins." All this took place to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet. "Look, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall name him Emmanuel," which means God is with us. When Joseph awoke from sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. He took Mary as his wife, but had no marital relations with her until she had borne a son. And Joseph named him Jesus. This is the word of the Lord. It's the Sunday before Thanksgiving, and all of the children of Vandalia Presbyterian Church in Greensboro, North Carolina, have gathered anxiously in the pews in the afternoon. There they are awaiting their assignments, and even though my father, the pastor, was the director, I was as uninformed as any of my peers as names were called and scripts were distributed for the annual Christmas pageant. But like all of my classmates and my friends, I was hoping, fingers crossed, praying for anyone but Joseph. The truth is, no one wanted to be Joseph. For starters, you had to endure the ridicule of being married to one of the girls your own age. And that in itself was enough to put us all on edge. But perhaps more importantly, when Nancy Cox and her crew of volunteers led us to the costume closet for our fittings, Joseph got a raw deal. Wise men, they got the best props, the treasure chests and bottles of potions. They wore crowns and shiny robes. Shepherds, well, shepherds got those staffs to hold, which were perfect for sword fights. If you know, you know. Angels had all the glitter in the closet, along with halos hovering above their heads. And even the animals got costumes with floppy ears and tails. Joseph got a reused bathrobe and a single spot to stand. And that was it. No lines to dramatically deliver from on stage. Joseph was, well, boring. A passive observer as the story went by. Already in place when the shepherds arrived. None of those gifts from the wise men were given to him, cast in shadows while the spotlight illuminated the manger and the mother only inches away. The truth is that without these 8 verses from Matthew's gospel you just heard, we would know almost nothing about the human father of Jesus. And even with this brief account, we are missing so much as the text moves quickly from one action to the next, never pausing to consider the emotional impact or the inner monologue of this first-time father. Here's what we do know. Mary and Joseph are engaged to be married. According to the first century Jewish custom, their engagement was more than a promise. It was a binding contract between their families. Even though the couple does not yet live together, they are legally bound to each other. And during this engagement period, their contact would have been severely limited and carefully arranged by their parents. When Matthew flatly reports that Mary was found to be with child, the passive voice leaves us with some questions. Who delivered this heartbreaking message to Joseph? Who else knew before him? How was it received? You have to remember that Joseph knows nothing of Gabriel's visit and announcement to Mary. He only knows two things. His fiancée is expecting a child. He is not the father. The news surely would have been shocking, devastating. And so we should be impressed that despite the grief and the pain, Joseph is prepared to do the right thing. Not the legal thing, but what feels right in his heart. He will not publicly shame the woman he loves or expose her to disgrace. He will quietly, privately go his own way. He will allow Mary to do the same. It is a response of restraint, even mercy, one that preserves Mary's dignity and possibly her life. Though the practice had faded, the legal code of Leviticus commanded stoning for the violation of a marriage contract. It's hard to imagine that Joseph was sleeping much at all those days, but somehow he manages to doze off maybe for a few moments, and this is when his angel appears in a dream. The messenger calls Joseph by his name, Joseph, son of David. He begins with the predictable and preposterous angelic introduction, "Do not be afraid." Yeah, right. Before describing what has happened and what Joseph must now do. And here is the miracle. Joseph believes it. He believes the angel's announcement and follows his irrational command. Matthew records what happens next as if it was the most natural response in the world. Joseph wakes up, next scene, a wedding celebration. Next scene, Mary gives birth to a son. But imagine the moments in between. Consider the courage it took to take each step forward in faith, to follow the underexplained instruction of a divine messenger. Ah, yes, just before he departs, the angel does have one more request. Name the boy Jesus. In a message devoid of details, this one stands out to me. After all, Matthew has just listed the genealogy of Jesus back 42 generations, dozens of names, and not one Jesus. It's fair to guess that the name would never have occurred to Joseph or to Mary. Name the boy Jesus, or in Hebrew, Yeshua, Joshua. Names matter. This one means he saves. And that is just what the angel says the child will do. He has come to save, to redeem, to rescue, to set right and set free. Jesus. That's the name the angel gives to Joseph. Jesus. That's the name Joseph gives to his son. And when he does that, I believe with all my heart that Joseph understands for the first time the message of the angel. The boy's name is Jesus. Two of the most memorable moments of my life occurred when these fragile, beautiful human creatures were placed in my hands for the first time. When our second son was born in March of 2017 and I was holding him, the delivery nurse came and stood next to us. She asked me his name. She wanted to write it on the whiteboard in the room. But I was so fully absorbed in the moment that I didn't hear her question, and so she repeated it. "Sir, your baby, what's his name?" "His name is Benjamin Andrew," I said. The nurse looked down at him. "Well," she said, "welcome to this crazy world, baby Ben. We're counting on you to make it a better place. A charge and a blessing." When the time comes, Joseph does what the angel told him to do. He names his firstborn son Jesus. He begins the journey of loving that child with everything he has, giving him the best and the most he can. And not all at once, but gradually over time, Joseph begins to understand that he too was chosen, that he was chosen to be the father of this child, this particular child, to teach him and nurture him, to guide him, to show him how to respond with gentleness in a harsh world, to stand tall when the world falls apart, to make this world a better place. We're counting on you. In those moments, Joseph must have remembered the words of the angel, words he heard in his own voice. His name is Jesus. Names matter. And perhaps you noticed that Joseph and Mary's son is given two of them. Yeshua, he saves. That's the name Joseph gave. But Matthew reaches back to remind us of another name, and I'm sure glad he does. A Hebrew title first proclaimed by the prophet Isaiah. It is a name and a promise, Emmanuel. The word itself is a promise given to exiles in Isaiah's day and repeated for those who live in a land of deep darkness in every generation. Emmanuel, the promise, God is with us. That's how Jesus saves. Not through coercive power or domination. Salvation does not come in the form of a conquering in the form of a conquering hero, but in a crying baby. Jesus saves us by keeping the promise that God is with us. It is the promise that Joseph first hears in the voice of the angel. Name him Jesus. He will save. Name him Emmanuel, because God is with us now. And so he is. The final words of Matthew's gospel confirm the promise that opens the story. That baby, all grown up now, speaks to his disciples, "Remember, I am with you always, even to the end of the age." For those whose lives are set in shadow, this is the light that will never be extinguished. Emmanuel, God is with us. For every one of us overwhelmed by anxious worry for the future, held back by regret over the pain of the past, this is the truth that despite all the lies we tell ourselves endures, God is with us. For all who need a ray of hope, a picture of peace, a song of joy, a rebirth of love, this is the message that still astonishes us. God is with us. And whenever we peel back all the layers of this complex story, there is one simple promise to which we can tether our lives in this and every season. When all is said and done, we will be saved by the presence of God. Emmanuel, God is with us. He may not be the most popular role at the pageant, but I wonder if Joseph is the character you need most. The one whose example you can follow. Give your name, your best and your most, to God's gracious plan. Welcome salvation as simple, sacred presence. Stand firm and do right. This week, somehow, in the frenzy of these final days, Christmas will come. The God of the universe held in the trembling hands of an awestruck father. Do not be afraid. Believe this. God is with us. Love is on the way.